Nostalgia is a powerful tool in many things, not just video games, but when you're looking at what you do enjoy in media and what you don't like in media, you're going to see that nostalgia plays a large part in this. Nostalgia affects what you did like, what you think other games are supposed to be like in order to enjoy them, and what in general shapes your version of what a good game is. Although nostalgia applies to many facets of life, in video games it's one core aspect of what determines what you're going to like about a game and what you're not. For me, nostalgia plays a gigantic part in the games that I even purchase now, and it makes it a bit hard to get into games that I didn't play as a kid. Of course, everyone has their own selection of games that they played as a kid, and of course the nostalgia you have for those games is going to impact what you think a game needs and what it doesn't, and what a good game essentially is. For me, when I played Halo 2, 3, and even Combat Evolved when I was a kid, I thought many other first-person shooters needed to be like that. When I found out now that there's not many that are like Halo, of course there is some out there, such as Titanfall, I guess is one of the close examples I can think of in terms of that first-person shooter gameplay. I didn't really feel that other games out there could have that same story impact of Halo. And although I was a kid while playing those games have built a large bias into me of what a good first-person shooter is, because those games set the bar so high, it's hard for other first-person shooters that come out nowadays to match that, especially with the older Call of Duty games such as Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3. All these games built to me what a good first-person shooter and multiplayer game could be. However, when games nowadays are not releasing in the same state, that same polish as those games, especially in the multiplayer department, looking at Battlefield 2042 for example, that game launched in an absolutely atrocious state, and my nostalgia for the older Battlefield games makes it so that my expectations are so much more higher than what DICE is currently delivering. And although nostalgia can impact you negatively in that aspect, there's a lot of good nostalgia aspects that you can find when playing other video games. I enjoyed Assassin's Creed as a kid, so I enjoyed playing the series all the way up to Origins. Now, of course, when I fell off the series, I understood how great those games actually were in the first place. Recently, I've been wanting to see whether the games that I used to play as a kid were really as good as I thought they are. And I replayed Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations about 2 years ago now, because I didn't think that they were going to be as good as I thought. And of course, they stayed absolutely perfect to what I expected. But I think nostalgia still plays a major part in that. Of course, my taste for games may have changed, but Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations have the nostalgia aspect that boosts their level far above any other game that I can play. When I ask someone else to play the Assassin's Creed Ezio collection, they're not going to have that same eagerness to play the games, and they might not think that the games are that great. They've aged quite poorly in some aspects, especially in the gameplay, and a lot of the graphics and just the general design of the game is quite outdated. But for me, I just ignored all those issues. It's like they didn't even exist. So when someone else is playing the game, especially when they've played modern games, especially in the PS4 and PS5 generation, going back all the way to the PS3 generation, then playing Assassin's Creed games that are much more outdated than the ones coming out, a different formula for most, you're gonna see that some people are not gonna like the games like I did. But nostalgia is what makes those games so good in the first place. Of course, Assassin's Creed games are fantastic, especially the early few, but having that nostalgia aspect to them makes them even better in my eyes. It can bring an 8 out of 10 game to a 10 out of 10, especially when the nostalgia level is that high. Another game series that I can relate quite heavily to Assassin's Creed nostalgia is the Batman Arkham series. These games directly coincided with my love for Batman media, so when I played these games, I already had that facet going for the games. But now that I have nostalgia for the games as well, the games are some of the best games I can ever think of. The Batman Arkham games are some of my favorite games. I definitely put them in the top 3 games that I've ever played, and that's because of the nostalgia aspect of those games. Sure, the story of the games is fantastic, sure the gameplay is fantastic, sure everything about the game's design is amazing, but the games aren't truly a 10 out of 10. There is some flaws to be had, especially in Batman Arkham Knight. When I first played that about 7 years ago, I absolutely enjoyed the game to its limits. I thought Batman Arkham Knight was the greatest game of the entire series, and I still do think so now, but I think when I go back to it now, 7 years later, that nostalgia aspect is still going to bring the game up to the level that I had it when I originally played it. And that's what nostalgia for games does. It brings games that are not as great as you think they are to a level that far exceeds that. But it can also bring an already great game to an even higher level, especially as I said with the Assassin's Creed and Halo games for example. Those games are already fantastic, but then having nostalgia attached to that makes it some of the greatest games that I've ever played. But nostalgia affects what I play now as well. Of course, I really wasn't into story-based games, especially until I got my PS4 in 2015. I didn't really enjoy those type of games. Sure, I played Batman Arkham, I played Halo, I played Assassin's Creed, but I was more there for the gameplay. I didn't really care about the story. So when I started playing these story-based games, I looked for key components of that story that would link back to an Assassin's Creed story, to a Halo story, or to any other game story that I've played. Especially when playing, for example, the Spider-Man PS4 games. They're absolutely fantastic games and some of my favorite superhero games out there. But every time I play them, all I can do is compare them to Batman Arkham. Of course, many people do this, but I think a large factor of it is the nostalgia that you held for those games. So when you're going to be playing any other superhero games, what makes that game good, or what the aspects of that game need to be, are going to be good based on your nostalgia for the other superhero games, namely the Batman Arkham games. This can be relied in different aspects of all types of gaming, and sometimes this nostalgia aspect for games makes it hard to get into games that are not similar to what you played as a child. Especially when I tried to play Elden Ring. I absolutely enjoy Elden Ring. I think Elden Ring is going to be this game of the year, and I think it's one of the greatest games that's come out in the half decade of gaming recently. However, it was really hard to get into at first. I've never really played a challenging game, and especially I haven't played games that are not based off stories or particular moments in those games that define what they are. Elden Ring is very different. There is no story, or there is a story of course, but you're gonna have to find that story. I haven't really played many of those games. I still haven't to this day. Elden Ring is probably the only game I've played where you're supposed to find the story. It just doesn't fit to my liking of games based on the games that I've played in terms of story-based games. And so when I try and play a game like Elden Ring, it was hard at first, but Elden Ring has environmental storytelling, for example, telling its story through the environments that you go through, and this aspect of the game makes it fit right into my liking, despite it going against many of the points of nostalgia that I have for games that defines what a good game is. What I want you to think about by watching this video is the games that you've played as a kid, the games that you have the most nostalgia for, those games that you think are absolute 10 out of 10, and you don't care what anyone says about those games, they're absolutely perfect in every single component of the game. However, you haven't played that game in a few years, or even 10, 15 years. I want you to go back, play those games, see whether those games are truly as good as you once thought they were. Of course, the bias of nostalgia is always going to be lingering about, so try and take away that bias for just a minute. Evaluate the game for what it is. See if that game is truly as amazing and groundbreaking as you once thought it was. I've had various moments going back and playing games that I played as a kid. One such game was the GTA game that was on the PSP. I don't exactly know what it was called. I'll probably pop it up on screen now, but that game was absolutely amazing when I played it as a kid, playing on the little PSP there. I thought that was GTA, for example. But when I bought the game about a year ago, I realized that the game was not good at all. It's the worst GTA game that you could play, or one of the worst games. It's not a good entry point into the series overall, and I really did think that the game was going to capture that same sort of nostalgia I had. I never even did the story of the game. I didn't care about stories, especially playing the game as a little kid. All I did was play with the cars, the guns, running around doing whatever I want, but I don't find that same fun, that same childlike fun that I find when I'm playing the game as a kid. And that's because a lot of my taste for games have changed, and especially that the nostalgia for that game just didn't hold strong enough for me to disregard many of the negatives of the game. Then I realized, although the nostalgia is a powerful tool stringing you to many of the games that you played as a kid, making them seem like perfect 10 out of 10 scores, there's many games that you can't even think of right now that you're going to go back to and realize that that game isn't as great as you thought it was as a kid, and the game is not actually good. And there's many instances of this. So I want you to go back to a game that you thought was absolutely fantastic. Go and play it. See whether that game is truly as amazing as you once thought it was, and come back to this video. Let us know what you thought about the game after playing it, after whatever many years you've played it, and tell us what you think about the game nowadays. Of course, your taste for games have changed, your taste for media have changed, and you've grown up. So those games are not going to have that same impact that you had when you first played the game. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. I'll see you all in the next one. I hope you enjoyed, and peace.